Alright, so we're starting in Section 3 of Unit 1. We're going to be doing factoring and solving quadratics. As a review, you already know how to use the quadratic formula, but I'm going to show you a few other ways to factor. You will need these next unit, so it is good to go ahead and start seeing them. And then I will show you a few things about the quadratic formula as we go along further in this unit that you need to know about it. So the first thing that I want you to look at, I want you to highlight or write down the word roots, x-intercept, and zeros. Those words, those three words, all mean the exact same thing. That means that when we are solving a quadratic, we are finding where they cross the x-axis. So we're finding their x-intercepts, where they cross the x-axis, or it's also referred to as their zeros or their roots. So from here on out, or even in further in other units, when you hear one of those words, they all mean the same thing. All right? Now, to solve the quadratic, we have to factor it. So that's the first thing that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to factor it. Now, when you factor, you're going to get two solutions. Okay? Now, one way to know how many solutions you're going to get is by looking at your exponents. I have x squared. Well, that's my biggest exponent, so that lets me know I'm going to have two solutions. This right here tells me if I had x cubed, I would have three solutions. So that always lets me know how many answers I'm going to have. I'm dealing with quadratics, which is x squared, so I'm going to have two solutions every time. Now, when you are dealing with an x squared and you go to graph, your graph is going to look something like that right there. It's going to be a parabola, a U shape, or an upside down U. It could be turned sideways or whatever. But that is what your graph is going to look like, all right? Now, we're going to go ahead and factor x squared plus 7x plus 12, which is equal to 0. All right? Now, I don't know if you remember, but one of the best ways to do this is to factor using the x method. Now, in order to do that, we have a number here and a number here. Now, when we add those two numbers together, we will get the number that is on top. When we multiply those two numbers, we'll get the number that's on the bottom, all right? Now, when they're added together, we always want our center number to be right there. When you add, it'll always equal your center number. Now, when you multiply, it will always be your constant, your number that is by itself. It has no variables. So you're wanting your numbers that you have to be able to be multiplied together to get that number that stands by itself. All right? So we need to look and see what the factors of 12 are. And if you need to write this down, you can. As we get into some bigger numbers, this might be helpful. If you can recognize really quick, that's fine as well. So the first factor is 1 and 12, and then 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Now, that is all the factors of 12. All right? Well, if I look at that, then I know the ones that are going to give me, that are, if I take and I add them together, I need them to get 7. Well, these two right here are going to be the ones that give me that. So my numbers are 3 and 4. All right. Now, when I'm factoring, I'm going to put them in parentheses. So I have a 3 in one, and I have a 4 in the other. They're both positive, so plus is going to be in the middle. Now, to know what goes right here in the front, I have to look at what this is. It is an x squared, so there's no number in front. Well, 1 is in front, but you don't need to worry about that 1. But what do I multiply together to get x squared? And that is going to end up being x times x. Now I have my factors done. All right? But I'm solving. It didn't say just factor. It said factor and solve. So I need to solve this. In order to solve it, I'm going to take and set each factor equal to 0. So I'm going to have x plus 3 is equal to 0, and x plus 4 is equal to 0. So all I'm doing is taking what's in parentheses, and I'm setting it equal to 0. All right? Now these are your one-step, two-step equations that you learned back in 8th grade. So I need to get x by itself. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. When I do that, I have x. This positive 3 and the negative 3 cancel out. And that equals, I have 0 minus 3, so negative 3. So I have x is equal to negative 3. But how many answers do we need? This number right here tells us we need 2 solutions. So I need to do the other one. So subtract 4. This is going to cancel. I have x is equal to negative 4. Now I have this factored. And I know that my graph is going to cross the x-axis. When I go to graph this, it's going to cross the x-axis. And if we look back up at the parabola, it would cross at, say, this is negative 3 and negative 4. So our graph would cross somewhere in there, in that area. All right? Now, if we look at the bottom of that page, it says, what if we have to factor and solve a binomial? A binomial means 2. We have 2 terms. Now, if you look at these next examples, we only have 2 terms. There's nothing in the middle of them. So we have to figure out how to use these. I'm going to add an extra sheet so that way you can take some notes. So find a way to take some notes, or find a place to take some notes. And then we'll go back to practicing these. But there are 3 ways to actually solve a binomial. The first way is your greatest common factor. All right? So GCF. My example for that is going to be 8x plus 16. So I have a binomial. I need to see what my factors are. I need to factor this out. So I need to find a greatest common factor. I need a factor of 8, and I need a factor of 16. Well, I know myself, and you can use your calculator or whatever you need to figure this out, but I know that 8 is a factor of both 8 and 16. So if I take 8 out of my equation, the way to do that is I'm going to divide 8 by 8, and I'm going to divide 16 by 8. All right? Because it's going to be on the outside. So 8 divided by 8 is 1. I keep my x, and I keep my sign that I have, which is plus. And then 16 divided by 8 is 2. And then I have this completely factored. And I'm good. Now, one thing that I want to show you, because we're going to get into this in the next unit, but if you look, what is my exponent right there? If there's not one, it's a 1. Well, when I go to set these 2 equal to 0, 8 is not equal to 0, so that's not going to be a factor. But I could set this equal to 0, and I will get one solution. So that lets me know that I've done it right. All right? You don't have to worry about that, but we will be looking at that in the next units. All right, the second way to solve is called DOS, or also known as the difference of squares. Now, you should have a blue sheet that you can use. It has your square roots on it. But just know that difference means I'm going to have subtraction, all right? So in other words, my difference of squares is I'm going to have a perfect square with a variable minus another perfect square, all right? So I'm going to have 2 numbers that are perfect squares. And I'm not going to do an example of this. Well, I'll go ahead and do an example real quick. So my example is going to be, let's see, 4x squared minus 25. All right. So now I can use this as different as squares. The first thing that you need to notice, I'm going to erase this little subtraction sign and move it up. The first thing that you need to notice is that I have that subtraction sign right there. Now, the next thing you need to notice is that 4 and 25 are both perfect squares. If you use that blue sheet, you will know that. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my square root of 4 is 2, my square root of x squared is x, my square root of 25 is 5. Now I have my numbers that I can use for my factoring. So I'm going to end up with 2x plus 5 and 2x minus 5. And then I can set those each equal to 0 and get my answer. All right? Now the reason that I need a plus here and a minus here is if you remember the box method or the foiling method where you multiply these two and then these two and then these two, you're going to multiply the 5 and the 5, and whatever you get, you want it to equal this negative 25 right here. Well, I know a positive and a negative is what it's going to give me, a negative number. If I multiply a positive and a positive, I get a positive. If I multiply negative and a negative, I get a positive. So I know that's the only way to get that. All right? Now, the other way to do this is to solve by the square root. So solve by square roots. On this kind, you're going to see something like x squared minus, let me erase that so it looks right, minus 81. All right? Now if I add 81 to both sides, sorry, that's going to equal 0. If I add 81, that's going to cancel this out, and I'm left with x squared is equal to 81. Next, I will take the square root of both sides, and x is equal to 9. All right? So that is the 3 different ways that you can use or that you need to use. So I want you to be able to look back and forth at this while we're solving these next few to see if you can figure it out. All right, so if we look at this, all right, so this first one, we have a perfect square here and a perfect square here. And we have the minus sign right there. So on this one, we need to use the difference of squares. So I'm going to put a little symbol right here, that DOS, difference of squares. All right, so if I'm looking at this, the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of x squared is x. And the square root of 25 is 5. Now I have my factors. So I have 3x. And remember, I need my numbers at the ends to be multiplied together and give me a negative 25. So I'm going to have a plus and a minus in there. All right? Now I can set each of these equal to 0. If I look right here, this tells me I'm going to have 2 solutions. So I have 3x plus 5 is equal to 0. 3x minus 5 is equal to 0. Now I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides on this one. This cancels out. I'm left with 3x is equal to negative 5. The next thing I'm going to do, since these two are being multiplied, I'm going to divide by 3. This cancels my 3's out. I'm left with x is equal to negative 5 over 3. That is one of my answers. Now I need to do my other one, and I'm going to erase this and move it over a little bit so those two aren't going together. So 3x minus 5, and that's equal to 0. All right. On this one, I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So this cancels out. I'm left with 3x is equal to 5. Again, my 3 and my x are being multiplied together, so I need to divide by 3. That's going to cancel out my 3's. I'm left with x is equal to 5 over 3. Now I have my 2 answers. Okay? All right. Now let's do the x squared minus 49. What I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this so I have room. You should have room on your paper to do this. So that way you will be set for this. I'm just moving it so that way you can see. And I'm going to move these up just a little bit just so I have room under them and it doesn't take up as much space. So if I look at this one, I do have the subtraction sign there, but I don't have a number here. So it's probably going to be easier to do this one by the square roots. So I'm going to solve this one by the square roots. Okay? So in order to do that, I need to get x squared by itself, so I'm going to add 49 to both sides. Now, here's where your blue sheet's going to come in handy. All right? I'm left with x squared, the negative 49 and the positive 49 cancel. And then I have x squared is equal to 49. Now I'm going to take and do the square root of both sides. X squared, the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 49 is 7. Now, as I said before, we need 2 solutions. And this 2 right there lets me know that. All right? Well, I only get 1. So this is actually going to be plus minus 7. Because negative 7 times negative 7 gives me 49. Positive 7 times positive 7 gives me 49. So it's going to be plus minus because it could be 2 negatives or 2 positives. All right, our last one. If we look at it, 16x squared minus 81. This is a perfect square, and this is a perfect square. And this is our minus sign. So let's do DOS again. So the square root of 16 is 4. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 81 is 9. So we have 4x minus 9. 4x plus 9. Now we're going to set them each equal to 0. So 4x minus 9 is equal to 0. And then 4x plus 9 is equal to 0. Now I'm going to add 9 to both sides. Those are going to cancel out, and I'm left with 4x is equal to 9. Now I'm going to divide by 4. And I'm left with my 4's cancel. I'm left with x is equal to 9/4. And that's one of my solutions. Now I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides. This cancels. 4x is equal to negative 9. Divide by 4. My 4's cancel. And x is equal to negative 9/4. Now, on these few, we have got positive, negative, the same answer. That is fine. And if you want to write plus minus, like we did with the 7, that's fine. I'm all right with that. But I will tell you, not all the time. As you saw in the first one we factored with the x method, you don't always get the same answer, plus minus. So just be careful in how to do that, okay? Now, we're going to try these real quick. There's only one step that's different in these. And then we're going to move on. So, we've got 3x squared minus 4 equals 68. Well, I need all of that together, okay? So I'm going to take and I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And that leaves me with 3x squared, is equal to 72. Now, I'm being multiplied by 3, so I'm going to divide so I can get x by itself. I have the x squared is equal to 24. And then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. All right? So x is equal to 24 is not a perfect square, but I know 6 times 4 are squares of, or perfect, or one of those is a perfect square. So if I take and do this is just saying I'm multiplying. If I multiply those together, 6 times 4 is 24. And they're both under the square root. Well, 4 is a perfect square. Its square root is 2. 6 is not, so I'm going to leave it under the square root. But I am going to take this down. I always put the whole number first, and then I put the square root. Of course, again, we need 2 solutions, so it's going to be plus minus. All right? Now, negative 20 plus 4x, and I'm going to move that up just so it's a little bit more even with that one. So negative 20 plus 4x squared is equal to 5. Now, you could take and do this a couple of different ways. It depends on how you like to look at the equation. But I'm going to take, and I'm going to add 20 to both sides. Okay? And I'm left with 4x squared is equal to 25. Now, I can take and divide by 4. I'm left with x squared is equal to 25 over 4. All right? Now I need to take the square root of both sides. So the square root of this, the square root of this. All right, so x is equal to the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 4 is 2. And that's going to be plus minus. And that is my answer. All right, you can pause the video and get this wrote down. But I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to show you the other way that you could do it, just so that way you have it. And I'm going to go ahead and erase this one so I have room for the other one that's right here. I'm going to go ahead and move it up for you so we can see it. But the other way to do this is I can subtract 5 from both sides. All right? That's going to put it equal to 0 because this is going to cancel out. And I have negative 25 plus 4x squared is equal to 0. Now, before you do this one, you're going to have to take and set this up in the standard position, which you always want your highest exponent to go first. So it's going to be 4x squared. So 4x squared, and it's positive. So 25 is negative, so I'm going to put minus 25. Now I can use DOS because I have the minus. I know 4 and 25 are both perfect squares. So the square root of 4 is 2. Square root of x squared is x. The square root of 25 is 5. So I'm going to take and do 2x minus 5, 2x plus 5. And then there I can set each of those equal to 0, which you're used to doing. I'm only going to do one right now. And I'm going to solve out to get my 2 solutions. And that is going to be 2x is equal to 5. So 2x is equal to 5 divided by 2. And I'm left with x is equal to 5 halves. Now you do the other one and you're going to get the negative 5 halves. But you can see that I got the same answer both times. So just know that there are multiple ways on some of them to do it. And I'm fine with either way, just so long as you can see it. Now 4x squared plus 11 equals 59, sorry. First thing I'm going to do is subtract 11. Okay? That's going to cancel this out, and I have 4x squared is equal to 48. Next, I'm going to divide by 4. I have x squared is equal to 12. Take the square root. 12 is not a perfect square, but we can break it down again. So x is equal to the square root of 4 times the square root of 3, because we know 4 times 3 is 12. So 4, I'm going to erase this out real quick. 4 is a perfect square. 3 is not, so we're going to leave it that way, but we have 2 square roots of 3. And of course we need 2, so plus minus. All right, if you have any questions over that, over factoring, it's okay. We're going to be working on that in the next unit as well. But I want you to see that because sometimes that's how you're going to have to factor. Now, if we try to factor this, and this should be x squared, not x to the 22. So we're going to do that right there. Now, we know that it's not difference of squares. There's more than 2 terms, so we can't use any of those 3. So let's try the x method. We need to add to get 4, because that's our center number, multiply to get 8. Well, if we look, our factors of 8 are 1 and 8, 2 and 4. Now, is there any of those that we could add together to get 4? No, because this one's going to give us, if we add them, we will get 6. If we subtract them, we're going to get 2. This one is going to give us 9 and 7. So neither one of those works. So we cannot do the x method. It's not going to work on that one. All right? All right, so sometimes they can't factor. When that happens, that's when you're going to refer back to your quadratic formula. All right, and you have the quadratic formula on here. The first number, the one that's always next to your biggest variable with the exponent, the highest exponent, it's always your a. Then you have your b, and then your c is always a constant. It's easy. That's a good way of remembering that. C is always the constant. All right? It's always the one that stands by itself. Now, a is always going to be the first one, but it needs to be the one with the highest exponent. All right? Now, one thing that you need to notice is right here, this will always change your sign of what you have in your equation. So if I have a positive, looking at this, I have a positive in my equation. When I plug b in, I'm going to end up with a negative b. If I had a negative b up there, when I plug it in, I'm going to get a negative b, which equals a positive b. So that sign right there is always going to cause your sign to change. Now, when you use the quadratic formula, you can see I have a plus and a minus right here. That's going to let me know that I need to get 2 answers. I'm going to add b to everything that's over here, and I'm going to subtract b to everything that's over there into the square root, okay? So that is the 2 steps that I'm doing with that. All right, so let's try this one. I'm going to plug everything into the quadratic formula, and then I'm going to go through and I'm going to do not change these to decimals. Do not change them to decimals. Leave them in a square root if it is not a whole number, okay? So I'm going to do the first one with you. I'm going to talk you through it on the way to do it longhand. You need to know how to do that just because of the fact that when we get to going on the imaginary numbers, you will be good with this. So practice this longhand, all right? All right, so I'm going to do the first one with you. Numbers 3 and 4, I will show you how to fix those real quick. And then I want you to try those the other three on your own. Pause the video, try them, and then you can unpause it. I will have the answers there. I will not show the work. So I want you to actually take, if you have any questions, you can ask me during class. But I have A, B, and C. All right, my A is going to be my 1. It's in front. There is a 1 there. Although you don't see anything, there is a 1. My B is -2, and my C is -8. Now I can plug it all into the formula. So I have -2 plus minus square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times -8. And all of that is over 2A, which is 2 times 1. All right? Now, as I said before, a negative and a negative create a positive. So I have 2 plus minus. Now, under here, I'm going to take and I'm going to break this down. 2 squared is 4, okay? So I get 4. And then 4 times 1 is 4. And then 4 times -8, and this is actually a negative, so it's going to give me negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 8 is a positive 32. Sorry, I'm going to go ahead and give you the answer for everything. Positive 32. All right? So I'm going to take and put this down here, so plus 32. And all of that is over 2 times 1, which is 2. All right, so far that's where everything has come from. Now I'm going to keep solving out. So 2 plus minus 4 plus 36 is, 4 plus 32 is 36. So the square root of 36 all over 2. All right, the square root of 36 is 6. So we have 2 plus minus 6 over 2. All right, now remember, I said I had to have 2 solutions. And this is where that's going to, when I'm doing quadratic formula, this right here is where I'm going to get those 2. And it's going to be because of these 2 signs right here. Those 2 signs are telling me that I need to do 2 plus 6, and I need to do 2 minus 6. And I'm still going to simplify them by the 2 that's on the bottom. All right? So 2 plus 6 is 8 over 2, and then 2 minus 6 is negative 4 over 2. Now, when I simplify these, I'm going to get 4 for one answer, and I'm going to get negative 2 for my other answer. All right? So that's just doing it by hand, breaking it down slowly. Take your time. Look at the way I did it, the way I have my arrows and stuff pointing, where everything's coming from. And then I want you to try these 3, all right? Pause the video. I want you to come back after you've tried them, and I want you to take and see if you got the same answers I did. Before you get going on it, though, one thing I want to show you is down here you have a 7 on the other side. You just need everything on one side. Since this is a positive, I'm going to subtract it from both sides. Okay? It's going to cancel out over here, so I have 0. And then I'm going to have x squared minus 8x minus 7. And it's set up in the standard form. And also, there's nothing to combine that 7 with, so I have to just leave it like it is. Same thing over here. I'm going to subtract 19 from both sides. And there's nothing to combine it with, so I'm just going to have 25x squared minus 40x minus 19. Now, you can use a calculator if you want to. That's fine. But I just want you to be able to know how to do this longhand. All right? So go ahead and pause the video and see what answers you get. That way, you can unpause it and see if you get the same thing I've got. If you did, you were doing good. If you don't, slowly look back over your steps and see what's going on. And if you still can't figure it out, ask me in class. Okay? So the answer you're going to get for the second one is going to end up being negative 3 plus minus 3 square roots of 5 all over 2. Okay? All right, the answer you're going to get for the third one is going to be 4 plus minus the square root of 23. And the answer you're going to get for the last one is going to be 4 plus minus the square root of 35 divided by 5. And that will be your answers for those. And you are done with this part of this unit. We will be practicing this in class and stuff, so just be prepared. But if you have any questions, ask in class, and other than that, I think you'll be okay.